Radio's been around for a while. We don't even think much of it, but have you ever considered just how strange and wonderful radio truly is? Think about it for a moment and then consider that the format of commercial radio has remained more or less unchanged for nearly 100 years. In fact, we are approaching the 96th anniversary of the first commercial broadcast, which occurred in East Pittsburgh on November 2nd, 1920. Amateur radio users have been around for decades by this point, but commercial broadcasts to the public weren't yet developed. During the Great War, now known as World War I, the Westinghouse Corporation had developed radio communication technology for military use. These transmitters and receivers incorporated the audion tube invented by radio pioneer Lee DeForest in 1906. This vacuum tube was the first triode. Not to get too technical, but the development of this tube enabled voices to be transmitted clearer and enabled the Westinghouse devices to design transceivers capable of projecting the human voice into the ether. Prior to this, military naval transmissions were limited to bursts of dots and dashes that make up Morse code. During the war, the American government silenced amateur radio transmissions in the United States, excepting Westinghouse, who were given permission to conduct experimental trials from their East Pittsburgh office, as well as at Frank Conrad's home in Wilkinsburg, just east of Pittsburgh. Who was Frank Conrad? Well, Frank Conrad was an engineer with Westinghouse, and despite only having a 7th grade education, Conrad was an impressive autodidact who held more than 200 international patents. Conrad became involved in experimental radio as early as 1912 and operated stations from his home first in Swissvale and then above his garage in Wilkinsburg. Starting on October 17, 1919, Conrad began broadcasting, a term that he himself coined, selections from his phonograph collection. This proved popular enough that he began regular broadcasts, 2 hours in length and 2 days a week. The local Brunswick record company even struck a deal with Conrad, supplying him with new records in return for citing Brunswick as the source of the music. The following year, on October 27, 1920, Westinghouse received a commercial radio license. The original intention of such was so the company could relay information from their Pittsburgh offices to other offices such as those located in Cleveland, Ohio and Brooklyn, New York. Westinghouse license gave them the new call sign KDKA. A lot of people wonder why KDKA, being east of the Mississippi, has a call sign starting with a K. Many assume it has everything to do with their being the first licensed radio station, but this isn't true, as radio licensing was actually installed back in 1912, and at that time the protocol was to assign stations east of the Mississippi with a W and K for stations in the west. However, this was briefly suspended following the civilian radio ban enacted in World War I and lifted in October 1920. For a few short months in 1920, stations on ships were assigned with signs beginning with a W. All radio stations on land, though, such as Westinghouse's, were assigned a K. Following the shift back to former practices, the radio began booming, and KDKA was allowed to maintain their unique call sign. The first KDKA broadcast occurred on November 2nd, 1920, and here's an excerpt.
This is KDKA of the Westinghouse Electric and Manufacturing Company in East Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We shall now broadcast the election returns. We are receiving these returns through the cooperation and by special arrangements with the Pittsburgh Post and Sun. We'd appreciate it if anyone hearing this broadcast would communicate with us, as we are very anxious to know how far the broadcast is reaching and how it is being received. While we're waiting for the returns to come in over the telephone, direct from the Post and Sun, I'll give you the list of offices in today's presidential election. Here they are. Some 30 million Americans are electing a President of the United States, a Vice President, 34 United States Senators, 435 members of the House of Representatives, governors of 34 states, and thousands of minor offices, county judges, and officials. Okay, those are the offices to be filled. And here are the 7 complete presidential tickets that are being voted on. Republican, Warren G. Harding, Calvin Coolidge.